Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. I'm Ryan Wormeli, joined today by Pat Fitzmaurice and by Jake Ciely. It feels like every time I am taping these days, it is with you two. I can't remember the last time I did a show with Erickson or Debro or Welsh or Bogman. I saw the Dynasty show where you guys were also both on that last episode too. It always seems to be the three of us. We're having a good time here in the offseason, getting closer to draft season. We are not talking about incoming rookies today. We are talking about Fitz's favorite breakout stars for the 2025 season. And Jake, you get to just sit here, no prep, no having to come up with your own players. You just get to react mercilessly to Fitz.
Yeah, well, actually, so I was part of the contract I signed with you guys. Is he was like, "Hey, Fitz wants you to be on every show he's on," and I'm like, I guess I got to say yes to that because he's a cool dude. But yes, today I get to have some fun and nitpick every single one of his picks. But it's Fitz, so I have a feeling it's going to be tough to nitpick too many of them.
We are going to be going through Fitz's top 10 breakout stars. Fitz, was it easy to come up with this list, or did you feel like you had 15 guys and you had to whittle it down, or did you feel like you had like 7 and you had to expand it, or was 10 the right number to come up with?
10 was a good number. It was not easy because when you exclude rookies, it's, you've got to get guys who have already had, who haven't had seasons that could already be categorized as breakouts, and no rookies. That really narrows the pool of candidates. I'm certainly not guaranteeing that all 10 of the players we're going to discuss are going to become stars, but I do think they're all worthwhile investments for 2025, and my rankings sort of reflect that. So, yeah, this is going to be fun. I get to be here up under the Klieg lights while you guys get to sit in the darkened auditorium and just sort of heckle me. You're like the guys from the Muppets, Statler and Waldorf, the old guys who sat up in the balcony heckling.
Fitz, I made this clear to you before the show that I don't understand this reference.
You don't know the Tool old guy? You've probably seen him on something. And
Maybe I would if I Googled it. They would.
The Muppet movies are timeless.
Trigger something in my head.
I thought everyone.
I just kind of missed the Muppet. I'm not anti. It's not like I'm sitting here saying I hate the Muppets. I just kind of missed them growing up. So
I will say I do appreciate Fitz's point about I do the top breakout at each position. So every offseason is kind of like what we're doing today. And that's always my precursor is I say this is who doesn't qualify. And one of mine is that I don't think rookies can break out. Can they have an amazing debut? Sure, but I'm kind of always been that I don't think a rookie breaks out. I think a rookie just debuts really well.
Yeah, I would expect to have you guys throw fruit at me if I threw out Ashton Genty as my breakout star for 2025.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Everybody can find all of Fitz's and really our whole staff's 2025 consensus rankings and tiers. That's at fantasypros.com/rankings. If you want to see more players that Fitz is maybe higher than consensus on or ranking aggressively here early in the offseason. Before we dive into the show, Jake, what do you got going on at The Athletic?
Yeah, if you ever love mashups for player comps, I went overboard this year. I got a little drunk with them, and they go as far as something as simple as Jackson Smith and Jigba matched with some with Devonta Smith, and I called them Devonta Smith and Jigba. As far as down all the list of coming up with Jamal Murray, but not the basketball player, and I think I did Passy McDowner or something like that. I just went way deep and probably too far for some people, but the top 85 rookies I have for the pre-draft are over there on The Athletic right now.
Everybody can go check that out at The Athletic. Let's jump in. We're going to go 10-1 here, so we're going to finish with the guy that Fitz is most confident in as a 2025 breakout. We'll start at 10, though. Here, who you got, Pat?
Cedric Tillman. And Tillman is an interesting case. Over Cleveland's first 6 games of 2024, Tillman played no more than 26 snaps in any game, topped out at a 37% snap share. Then in week 7, Deshaun Watson tears his Achilles late in the first half against the Bengals. Dorian Thompson-Robinson came in, ineffective. Then he hurts his finger with under 5 minutes left in the game, and Jameis Winston comes in as the emergency third quarterback. Cedric Tillman got a big bump in snaps in that game with an 82% snap share. He had 8 catches for 81 yards on 10 targets. Only 2 of the targets and 1 of the catches, a 25-yard catch, came from Jameis Winston. All the other targets were from either Watson or DTR. So then Jameis starts in week 8 against the Ravens, throws for 334 yards and 3 touchdowns. Tillman has 7 catches for 99 yards, 2 of those touchdowns. The next day, approximately 48 million people put in waiver claims for Cedric Tillman. That's just an estimate, by the way. Our data guys are really good at Fantasy Pros. They're not that good. So then in week 9 against the Chargers, Jameis still at quarterback. Tillman has 6 grabs, 75 yards, and a touchdown on 11 targets. The Browns' next game is against the Saints. Tillman's numbers aren't great. 3 catches, 47 yards, 8 targets. He just kind of got left out in that game. Jerry Jeudy, David Njoku, and Elijah Moore combined for 21 catches, nearly 300 yards, and 2 TDs. And then the following week, Tillman gets a concussion. He ends up going on IR. He's inactive for the next 5 games and gets held out of Week 18. So we had a short but very promising burst from Cedric Tillman in his second NFL season. Some of it admittedly turbo-fueled by Jameis Winston's hyper-aggressive downfield passing style. Can Tillman give us a sustained starter-worthy fantasy performance in 2025? I mean, the bad news is that Jameis Winston is no longer in Cleveland. The good news is that the Browns added another hyper-aggressive, turnover-prone quarterback, Joe Flacco. And Tillman and Flacco have already played together in Tillman's rookie year 2 years ago. One of the 2 times Tillman had more than 50 receiving yards in a game that season was with Flacco at the controls. I don't know if Flacco's going to quarterback the Browns all year. I think the Browns might add a rookie QB. They'll want to give starts late in the season, or they may decide they simply can't live with the inevitable flood of Joe Flacco interceptions. But the possibility of Tillman playing a good chunk of the year with Flacco is pretty enticing. Tillman was an early 3rd-round draft pick, 6'3", with a 79th percentile speed score, big, physical, and we've gotten a glimpse of the potential. Like the hope is that Cedric Tillman can be sort of a discount Nico Collins this year. And I don't think you want to draft him to be a starter, but I like him as a high upside backup. His ECR right now is wide receiver 61, 160th overall. And if you can get him as a wide receiver 5 or wide receiver 6 in the later stages of a draft, that's an investment that could pay off pretty handsomely for you. And if it's not working out for Tillman, not really that painful to drop a 14th rounder.
Yeah, Jake, Tillman currently wide receiver 60 in the early ECR. Obviously, that's subject to change. Fitz highlighted that great stretch he had in the middle of last season, finishing wide receiver 14, wide receiver 3, wide receiver 12 in back-to-back weeks. I was at that game in Cleveland, the Ravens-Browns game last October, and I remember on one of our episodes that following week talking about how even setting aside the great numbers, the eye test of watching him in person, I came away thinking this is like one of the best receivers of football. Like I know that not to be a true statement, but just watching him, it was hard not to be blown away by his dominant performance. That was still when the Ravens secondary was struggling a ton before they had made the switch with Kyle Hamilton. So that certainly plays into that big game, but he was really dominant in that few week stretch. So where he stands now, wide receiver 60, Jake, do you agree with Fitz that this is a good pick as a potential breakout for 2025?
Yeah, this first one's tough, and I know he's only number 10 on the list, but I mean, technically, if he gets to wide receiver 40, it's a breakout. This is going to be kind of a which side of the fence do you want to land on where it comes to my explanation of that. I'm with, but also not with Fitz on this one, because I think 40's in play, and I think 40 is fine. Am I super excited about wide receiver 40? He's going to be my 4th wide receiver. We understand what we're getting with wide receiver 40. I think my issue would be if we're going past that. And one of the biggest things, like if we were talking Jameis Winston was back, sure, absolutely. But you brought up Joe Flacco, and I know there was the one good game with him, but also back at that time, Amari Cooper, Elijah Moore were Joe Flacco's go-tos. And I know Tillman was only in his rookie season, but I bring those names up to say stylistically that's not Cedric Tillman. And that's my concern, is that this version of Joe Flacco, when we saw with the Colts too, and connecting with Josh Downs, is that he kind of stopped looking to Michael Pittman. And I think that Tillman's peak, and I don't think he's as good a separator as Michael Pittman is Michael Pittman. Like Tillman to Pittman would be the peak. And I saw that Flacco just didn't have that same connection earlier in his career of going downfield. So I don't think it's a bad pick. I just think he could still be 3rd behind Jeudy and Njoku. And if so, wide receiver 3/4 is a breakout. 100% he's right. It's just I want to kind of caution people, like, don't go crazy. I don't think wide receiver 2 is in play, and I don't think Fitz was saying that.
So, Fitz kind of weighed in on what he thought the long-term prospects for later in the season of the quarterback position in Cleveland were. Jake, do you think it'll be Flacco for most of the year? I mean, as of the time when this episode's getting released, I believe it'll be just under a week until the NFL draft kicks off. So, we will find out soon what their plans are. not just the number 2 pick where it looks unlikely, but, even on day 2, if they want to invest in the quarterback position, the Browns, I think they probably should. What do you kind of expect at that position in Cleveland this year?
I think I wouldn't be shocked if they somehow went Sanders at 2, or if they took a quarterback early in the second, whether it's Milroe, Dart, or whoever it might be. I wouldn't be surprised at all, because you have to offset this Watson situation not going away by a rookie contract somewhere. And we know that Flacco and Pickett are holdovers. So when Fitz brought that up too, I do think whether it's turnovers, whether injury at this point of Flacco's age, Kenny Pickett maybe gets a start or two and looks like Kenny Pickett, that you might get a rookie in the back half of the season. So all that being said, that's another strategy that just comes with drafting Tillman. It's supreme value right now. Even if he's only wide receiver 40, he's a value right now. But remember this going into the season, especially if they do draft a rookie, that this might be a sell high candidate after 4 or 5 weeks if he is putting together top 30 numbers, and I'm wrong, and he's even better than that. So definitively somebody that I would be concerned about to this kind of question, which you didn't ask, but I'm kind of answering a different way. I would be concerned about his second half of the season, depending on who they draft. If it's Dart, maybe they connect like a Winston. If it's not, and it's more like a Sanders, who is going to be more in that mold of keeping it short to intermediate, a lot of completions, that's more of Judy and Njoku. So kind of depends on who they draft of where the concern might lie.
Fitz, did you say where you have Tillman ranked?
I did not, and I don't have that in front of me, but I think it's in the upper wide receiver 47, something like that.
I'll pull it up here. It looks like you've got him at wide receiver 50, which is it's 10 spots higher than Debro. It's 26 spots higher than Erickson. Wow. So he's much lower in Tillman. But yeah, you've got him wide receiver 50, which is the highest amongst the Fantasy Pros staff. That's in half PPR, by the way. All right, let's go to your number 9 breakout Fitz.
Yeah, we're going to go with Isaac Guerendo for this one. I think the path to fantasy stardom is pretty straightforward for Guerendo. Jordan Mason left San Francisco for Minnesota in free agency, leaving Guerendo as the primary backup to Christian McCaffrey. If I were to set an over-under of 13 and a half games played for McCaffrey, how are you guys betting it?
I actually wait. What do I get plus money on the over, right? Because then I would take the over.
Let's say even money, minus 110, both sides.
Most running backs, I'd probably take the under just of the risk to begin with.
You probably have to take the under. Yeah.
All right. So, yes, me too. And, in the 49ers' first 5 games of 2024, before Jordan Mason dinged up his shoulder, Mason was averaging 107 rushing yards per game, 120 scrimmage yards per game, and 5.1 yards per carry, and he was on a 10-touchdown pace. So Jordan Mason was the RB 5.5 point PPR fantasy scoring over those 5 games, 15.9 fantasy points per game. But Mason couldn't stay healthy last season, and Guerendo got a crack at some meaningful playing time in his rookie year. There were 4 games last year in which Guerendo played more than half of the 49ers offensive snaps. And in those 4 games, he averaged 63.5 rushing yards, 37.5 receiving yards, 101 scrimmage yards, 4.7 yards per carry, and he scored 3 touchdowns. Guerendo's 221 pounds and fast. I watched Guerendo play at Wisconsin for most of his college career as a backup to Braylon Allen before he transferred to Louisville. His speed was obvious, but I thought he was kind of a straight line runner back then. He did not look like a straight line runner last year. Isaac Guerendo showed a lot more wiggle and elusiveness than I had ever seen from him when he was at Wisconsin. It's possible the 49ers do draft a running back, but they suddenly have a lot of needs, and I wouldn't expect them to draft one before the 5th or 6th round. So I expect Guerendo to open the year as the top backup to McCaffrey, and if McCaffrey is suddenly seeing medical specialists in Germany again, Guerendo is going to be a player you will be excited to have in your fantasy lineup.
Really interesting group of names that he's among in our staff rankings at the running back position right now. I mean, Jake, the names that he is near: Ray Davis, Trey Benson, Cam Scatterbu, RJ Harvey, Isaac Guerendo, and Braylon Allen are all in a line from RB 47 to RB 52. So I wonder if that range will be, those rookies, obviously we need to see their landing spots, if there will be some degree of personal preference there. Does that feel like the right group of names for Guerendo to be ranked near?
So, yeah, I hate this pick because he should be higher, Fitz. I actually have Isaac Guerendo ahead of all those names as running back 43 because of the upside if something happens to CMC. As a Guerendo guy, as people, if they read over The Athletic was last year, I thought mostly because of his style, he's the perfect fit for a Shanahan offense. Like on a lot of teams, I think Guerendo's a talented running back. I don't think he has the success he sees with the 49ers on a lot of other teams because of the style fit. Just love the fit. And that's why I was so happy when we got rid of Mason. I was so concerned because they gave him that qualifying offer. And then I was like, wow, all right, cool. Things are cleared out. Yes, if something happens to CMC even for 5 games, Guerendo during that span is going to be putting up borderline RB1 numbers because of what he can bring. And then, of course, the fit here. The only thing that could throw a wrench into that is that the 49ers do what the 49ers do. And they might draft a round 4 or 5 running back who's falling in this draft with how deep this class is. Because they seem to do it every single year. They're like, we're just draft another one because we can make them all work in our offense. But I love this pick because I think why I have him at 43, because of all the handcuffs, as we'll call them, he would be top 1 or 2 on my list.
If there was ever a year for the Niners to take another day 3 swing at a running back, it's definitely this one. Fitz, what do you think about that? Are you willing to maybe move Guerendo up even higher than you have him?
Yeah, right now I've just got a kind of a placeholder ranking for him, like in the mid 50s, I think. But that is going to... I think I've got like 12 rookie running backs ahead of him, and some of those rookies are not going to land in great spots, and they're going to fall below him. And some of the rookies are going to land in spots where they nuke the value of other running backs. So at some point, I would imagine after the draft, I'm going to be moving Guerendo up probably 5 to 10 spots at least.
Guys, it is the best time to be a basketball fan. All the thrills and playoff drama, done sitting on the sideline and ready to win some real cash. Check out Pick 6 from DraftKings. When it comes to basketball payouts, DraftKings Pick 6 posterizes the competition, including prize picks. When you hit all your picks, you'll score higher minimum payouts on Pick 6 than flex plays on prize picks. And best of all, you'll win even more cash if you outscore the competition. Track your picks for a shot at huge cash prizes. That's all there is to it. Pick 6 is available in most states, including Missouri, California, Texas, Georgia, and more. Don't settle for a smaller payout. Switch to Pick 6 and cash in your basketball knowledge. New players get 50 in Pick 6 credits instantly on just a $5 entry. Basketball playoffs are here. Cash in with Pick 6 from DraftKings. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app now and use code FANTASYPROS. That's code FANTASYPROS for new customers to pay $5, get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Better payouts, bigger wins, only with Pick 6 from DraftKings. The crown is yours. All right, Fitzy, let's go to number 8 on your list.
Tucker Kraft, the one tight end on my list. And admittedly, calling Tucker Kraft a potential breakout star is a stretch. The upside for Tucker Kraft is probably somewhere between solid fantasy starter and guy you're not completely ashamed to have in your starting lineup. Kraft was the tight end 9 last year, 50 catches, 707 yards, 7 touchdowns. He averaged 4.1 targets and 41.6 receiving yards per game in 2024, his second NFL season. Considering that the Packers aren't going to have Christian Watson for much of the year, I think it's plausible that Kraft averages more like 5 or 6 targets a game this year, and maybe he gets to 50-plus receiving yards a game, which would make him an 850-yard receiver. I don't think Kraft has 1,000-yard upside like Brock Bowers or Trey McBride, but 800 yards makes you a mid-range tight end at worst. Maybe a high-end tight end 1, depending on the touchdown count. And what sort of touchdown potential does Tucker Kraft have? Well, I mean, he tied for 4th in red zone catches among tight ends last year, and he did that while playing in the 3rd run-heaviest offense in the league. The Packers aren't drafting a tight end until late day 3, if at all. They have much bigger fish to fry in the town of Green Bay, where they love their fish fries, by the way. So his status as the Packers' top tight end is safe, and I think it's reasonable to expect a target bump since the Packers' wide receiver core is looking pretty flimsy these days.
Jake, in our early staff rankings, Tucker Kraft, so there's a consensus top 11 in Sun Warner. Everybody has the same 11, and Kraft is 11th in our consensus rankings right now. So he's at the bottom of that kind of top group of starters that people are ranking at this point. Does that sound about right to you? He's right. He's one spot behind Travis Kelce, which I find interesting with Kelce. Obviously, another year older. You know, we would imagine they're kind of saving him for the playoffs. He's talked about how he wants to get in really good shape again this offseason. I mean, I don't know how much I'm going to be investing in Kelce this year. So him versus Kraft, I think, is an interesting conversation. But does that sound like the right range to him?
It sounds like a fair range. This is probably the one that I have the most issues with, just because I don't see where Kraft goes from last year. And all that being said, this is from somebody, and I'm not saying this to like victory lap. I'm saying as somebody who was behind Kraft, like when they both got drafted, Musgrave and Kraft, I said this is so strange, and I think it's weird that you take the better receiver later. And people were like, "Oh, I can't believe he's better than wide receiver than Luke." And I'm saying that to say like that's where I was coming from. Like I was the fan of Kraft over Musgrave, despite having the later draft capital. And yet, even being a fan of Kraft, I just don't love the breakout potential, because you're not wrong about Watson, but I still think you can get Wicks more involved. Just the offense, talking about in general, even if it's passing more, they still have 3 wide receivers that could be in play, potentially 4. I'm not even saying Hardman's a big threat. It's just there's a lot of people here where I don't see much room for Kraft to grow, as in for us in fantasy. Like if I was going to take a shot, I'd rather take a shot on like a Jatavian Sanders having a breakout season than a Tucker Kraft. So I don't hate Fitz on this one, because I have him as a fringe tight end one as well. I don't see where the breakout potential, it really is that severe.
Do you think, Jake, that there's room for, setting aside the situation itself, there's room for Kraft to take a step forward, just given that tight ends do typically take, a couple of, short of these generational guys like Brock Bowers, it usually takes a couple years for tight ends to really fully kind of break out at the NFL level. He's entering year 3. Does that make you think, like, again, setting aside the situation, that we could see a step forward from him just strictly as a player this year?
I definitely think you can see him grow more. I mean, we're talking about Sanders, McBrides of the world, just years 2 or 3 in some of these situations with tight ends. That's kind of a thing, is they still do take till year 3 a lot of times, unlike wide receivers these days. But yeah, the situation is just what. So you told me Watson never comes back, Reed gets hurt, or Dobbs gets hurt, or Wicks just never becomes a thing, I could get a little bit more on board. Again, I just think this is an offense where his max value we kind of almost just saw. Like I would say like maybe a 10% bump. And I just want to see more of like a 30-40% bump for breakouts, if we're, putting breakouts. And again, I'm nitpicking what the terminology of breakout is for me.
Fitz, last question on Kraft. Setting aside injury possibility, because we know that's a thing for everybody. If everybody's healthy on the Packers this year, Tucker Kraft will finish ranked what on the team in targets?
I think probably 3rd.
Ooh.
I'm going to say 3rd.
I was going to say 4th.
Yeah, Jake's
including the backfield.
4. Yeah, behind Reed and Dobbs. And I'll say he gets more targets than Dontavian Wicks and Josh Jacobs.
Okay. I think that would be pretty exciting if he was getting the 3rd most targets on the team, if he is taking another step forward. Let's go to your number 7, Fitz.
Marvin Mims. And this is a fun one. Mims really came on late last season. He had 6 touchdowns in Denver's last 7 regular season games and averaged 4 catches, 62 yards a game over those 7 games. And that was with a snap share between 23% and 47% in every game during that stretch. From week 11 on, Marvin Mims was wide receiver 21.5 point PPR fantasy points per game without playing even half of the Broncos' offensive snaps in any of those games. Now, here's a fun stat. During that stretch, he averaged 0.63 half-point PPR fantasy points per snap over those 7 games. To put that into perspective, Jamar Chase for the season averaged 0.14 half-point PPR fantasy points per snap. 0.63 for Mims over that 7-game stretch, 0.14 for Chase over the full season. No, I'm not trying to make the case that Marvin Mims is better than Jamar Chase, and obviously it was kind of a small it's kind of a small sample size too, but what Mims did at the end of the year was pretty eye-opening. And by the way, Marvin Mims just turned 23. Like, what if Sean Payton expands his role in the offense this year? I'm really intrigued by Mims' potential. His ECR is wide receiver 60, sitting there right with Cedric Tillman. 158th overall. There's very little risk to taking him that late in your draft, and the potential reward is pretty enticing.
Jake, what do you make of Mims? I think a lot of dynasty managers were pretty turned off by like just the no usage at all in that first year. And at least that was my experience in the leagues I was in going into year 2. Obviously, like had a better stretch in year 2 than he did at any point in year 1. What do you think about him going into year 3?
So it's interesting that you bring that up, Fitz, and then it's like, well, Sean Payton still didn't give him more opportunities. Like you can kind of make the argument the other way too. Like I could see the chance where Mims breaks out. He was actually in like my honorable mention list last year for my breakout column. He didn't make my top 5 wide receivers, but I kind of put a note in there about him, mostly because a lot of people do keep asking about him. You bring that up more within, dynasty and everything like that. I think the biggest thing that attracts everybody is the big play potential, the touchdown potential. But he's still kind of a chain mover. And I know that sounds weird because everybody's like, he can't be a chain mover. Look at the big plays. That's because he doesn't separate. Like, he's just go get it. And he does a really good job of going to get it. And he does have the downfield speed to go get it. But I'm just concerned that, they bring in Evan Ingram. And he's already like, I'm going to be the Joker. Sean Payton loves the Joker. They have Sutton. And I know we're doing this as of today. As of today, I am much more on board in it than I'm trying to put out of my mind that I really just don't believe they're going into this year with Mims as their number 2. But we are saying as of today, the draft hasn't happened yet. So as of today, if the roster is what it is and Mims can be the number 2, I will get on board, similar to like a Tillman in the 40s. I wouldn't push him as high as top 25 or 30. I'm not saying that's what Fitz said. I'm just saying I could see him being a wide receiver 4, mostly because I still think there's some limitations to him. Conversely, like they do draft a round 2 or 3 wide receiver. I think that'll tell us. This will tell us what Sean Payton believes. At the end of the season, is Fitz 100% right about his production? Yes, we all saw it. We all wanted more, but it's kind of like we all wanted more and still Payton wouldn't do it. So we'll find out what Payton thinks in the draft. We'll find out if Payton really believes that Mims can be the number 2 or if this is just his number 3. You get plays when you're on the field, but that's about it.
Fitz, do you know where you have Mims ranked?
Wide receiver 55.
Okay.
Pretty aggressive right now, but admittedly, Jake could be right. Like, I would not be shocked at all if the Broncos added a day 1 or day 2 wide receiver. So all of a sudden you throw Emeka Egbuka into the picture along with Cortland Sutton and Evan Ingram, and suddenly the prospects for Mims growing his snap share, not looking all that great. Yeah. So this is somewhat dependent on, he's got to get that snap share up to be someone consistently fantasy relevant. Whether he can do that if he's 4th in the target pecking order, pretty doubtful, honestly. But it would take some injuries most likely at that point.
Can
so
I ask a
you're
question?
kind of hoping.
I'm going to
absolutely.
The question. How about if they don't do a day 1 or day 2 wide receiver, but they do pull like an Omari and Hampton? Because then you're talking about passes going to the backfield too. So like would that kind of like, so the roster is constructed, they don't draft a wide receiver till round 5, but they draft a significant enough running back that you have some concerns there.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of baked in, Jake.
Okay.
Like I know Peyton's backs always catch a lot of passes. That's going to happen no matter who. Like last year was kind of a low water mark, I think, for receptions in a Sean Payton backfield. And that's probably going to tick up because we always saw his backfields in New Orleans, like among the most heavily targeted backfields in the league every year he was there.
Welcome now to this week's Chasing Challenges, brought to you by Microsoft. Just like the athletes who push boundaries and redefine what's possible, business decision makers today are turning challenges into opportunities. Microsoft meets you where you are with tools and guidance that help you make an impact with safe, secure AI solutions. Players and teams are facing their own challenges. In this segment, we spotlight athletes or teams that are currently undergoing a challenge, what this means from a fantasy or betting standpoint, and examine how we think they can overcome them. Whatever challenge you're facing, Microsoft empowers you with the expertise to say, bring it on. This week, we're discussing the challenge faced by Drake Maye as he enters the 2025 season with a lot of hype, but also some question marks. Maye was a top pick in last year's draft, and he showed flashes of why in moments during the 2024 season. He was unafraid to throw the ball deep and also unafraid to run with the ball, 2 traits very attractive to fantasy managers, but Maye's supporting cast was abysmal, and it doesn't look to be drastically improved in 2025. Prior to the 2025 draft, the Patriots still find themselves with massive holes on the offensive line. They're also hoping for Stephon Diggs to turn back the clock and to give Maye some kind of weapon in the passing game. Maye has the talent and work ethic to overcome the challenges of the system he was drafted into, but it will take a leap forward for the talented second-year quarterback to pay dividends for his fantasy managers. That's it for this week's Chasing Challenges. Remember, Microsoft's AI solutions empower you to take bold steps and make informed decisions, sparking new ideas to help drive your business forward. With Microsoft as your trusted partner, you can navigate your journey with confidence, finding innovative solutions, and reaching new possibilities. Visit Microsoft.com/challengers to learn more. All right, Fitz, we're going to dive into Drake Maye even more a little bit later in this segment. But for now, let's get to a different quarterback that you have on your breakout list.
And a different second-year quarterback, it's Michael Penix Jr. He is not going to give you much value as a runner. We know that. But Michael Penix Jr. has a golden arm. This dude can really spin it. He averaged 340 passing yards a game over his final 2 college seasons at Washington. Penix only started 3 games at the end of his rookie season, so we didn't get a big sample size, but the results were pretty encouraging. 245.7 passing yards per start and 7.4 yards per attempt. Good numbers for a rookie seeing NFL defenses for the first time. Penix is great at avoiding sacks, and his college interception rate was low. Those 2 attributes might not mean much to fantasy managers on the surface, but sacks and interceptions are drive killers, and avoiding them keeps the ball in your quarterback's hands, gives him more chances to accrue fantasy points. So I'm ranking Michael Penix Jr. in QB2 range, but I do think there's low-end QB1 upside here, even though Penix doesn't offer much as a runner. And this time a year from now, I think Michael Penix will be widely regarded as one of the 10 best pure passers in the league.
Wow, that's pretty aggressive praise. Jake, I'm curious not only what you think of Penix now. He's currently ranked in a back end of QB2 range. He's QB 23 in ECR right now. But also, what did you think of him going into last season, coming out of the draft?
So the smashes for my rookies, he was one of the ones like this kind of started last year and again snowballed. Derek Stafford, I'll kind of tell you, and I said Derek Carr is probably the low end for him, but that was my point. It's 2017, Derek Carr's bad season was kind of my low watermark for what I thought Penix would do as a full-time starter, and I thought that some of the best seasons of Matt Stafford would be some of the best seasons we could see from Penix. Right now, probably somewhere in between. But I do think he still has that ceiling. As Fitz brought up, it does have to do all with his arm, though, for us in fantasy, is that we are going to be concerned that he doesn't run. So to get the QB1 status, it's going to have to be 4,400 yards, 30, 35 touchdowns. But I do think he has the ability to do so. I would take him over Trevor Lawrence. I would take him over Tua at this point in fantasy, just because of what I've been dealing with those situations. And we don't know what's going on with Tyreek Hill and the Dolphins at this point. But I think that back end QB2 is where he should be, just because if you told me he even had 300 rushing yards, I'd put him up to QB 16, 17 range. It's just the almost zero rushing puts him down in that group of he has to do it. CJ Stroud, you can make an argument Stroud versus Penix next year, depending on what happens with both teams in the drafts, because we've seen some Stroud, terrific pocket passer, but what kind of team are they going to put around him next year with all the concerns on the offensive line? So I think that's where they fall in the range. Is that you could see that fringe QB1 on a great passing season, but understand you're talking about somebody that's low end QB2. It isn't necessarily a bad thing. It just means you're not getting the rushing upside.
So Fitz, if you in a super flex had Penix as your QB2 as of right now, on a scale of 1 to 10, what's your happiness level with that? How confident are you in your quarterback group if he's your number 2?
5 or 6. I'd be pretty content as long as my QB1 was a top 5 guy. Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels, Jalen Hurts, Joe Burrow.
Okay. Let's go to your number 5 breakout candidate.
Jaylen Warren. So Najee Harris is no longer a Steeler. He's with the Chargers. Jaylen Warren sits atop the Steelers running back depth chart, at least as of now. Will Pittsburgh draft a running back? Probably. But will they draft a running back who outtouches Warren this year? I kind of think it's unlikely. The Steelers don't have a second-round pick. They need quarterback help. They need defensive line help. They could use a slot receiver. They could stay and add depth on the O-line and in the secondary. Warren seems destined to play a bigger role in the Pittsburgh offense this season. Maybe only slightly bigger because he is 5'8", 215 pounds. He's not getting 20 carries a game, but Warren has averaged 61.7 scrimmage yards per game over the last 2 years while sharing work with Najee Harris, basically being the 1B to Najee's 1A. And Najee didn't miss any games over that stretch, so there were no usage spikes for Jaylen Warren. I think Warren can surpass the 1,153 scrimmage yards and 61 receptions he had in 2023. And it certainly wouldn't be hard for him to top his previous single season high in touchdowns, which is only 4. So Jaylen Warren's averaged 4.8 yards per carry over his career, but he's never averaged more than 8.8 carries per game in any of his 3 NFL seasons. We could very easily get a breakout season from Jaylen Warren in 2025 if he can just average double-digit carries.
Jake, what do you make of Warren? I mean, I feel like he's a guy who's been talked about as Potential sleeper, a guy that, I know Debra has been really high on in terms of like draft day values in fantasy. With Najee gone, do you agree with Fitz that there will be a real runway here for Warren, or do you think the Steelers will look to add a different running back? And if there is a real runway, do you think Warren will take advantage of it?
So yes, no, yes. So, actually, like right now, I have Warren at 21. I go actually Najee Harris, Kenneth Walker, Jaylen Warren, Montgomery, Aaron Jones, Tony Pollard, Tyrone Tracy, and so forth from there. So he's kind of right on that almost last lead, starting to talk split backfields. But where I'm with Fitz in the fact that because of their draft capital, I don't see them drafting a Scadaboo or somebody with that kind of power complement to him. That would be a significant 50-50 split, or even worse for Warren, just because to do so, it would mean they're first or third round, and there's so many other issues, as Fitz brought up, including quarterback. If it's a day 3 power guy, it's a day 3 power guy. Like, again, then he's probably the complement, whereas we've seen the NFL kind of move into more of a, it used to be the power was complemented by the pass catcher. We're kind of getting more into the pass catcher, elusive running back complemented by the power guy. And I think the Steelers are kind of going down that road with Warren, where I think he could even be better than where I have him at 21. Like if you told me the difference between Warren and you want to argue Chuba Hubbard, I'd be like, I'm not going to argue too long if you want to make one case versus the other. I think they're in the same tier for me. So I'm with Fitz on this one completely. It feels good because I feel like I've been kind of coming after him for the last 2 or 3, but I'm fully on board with the Jaylen Warren, and I think this is a good spot. I think that's actually above consensus to have him at RB21, actually.
It is, I believe. I'm looking right now on the staff rankings. I wanted to see the gap between where Najee is ranked and where Jaylen Warren is ranked this year. Fitz, it looks like you have them about 3 spots apart as of the most recent rankings update. Does that gap sound right to you, Jake? 3 spots apart. Do you see them as relatively close where you're going to have them ranked, or do you see a wider gap there?
I have one. I go Harris, Walker, Warren. Yeah, I have the same group. I think Harris is safer. I think Warren has the higher ceiling. I think Harris is safer because we know he's going to get probably close to 20 touches a game with the Chargers. But surprisingly, the Chargers, and it could just be the chicken or the egg situation, they weren't very run heavy once they got inside the 5 and inside the goal line, which was kind of strange given the Chargers and their makeup last year. They were actually one of the lower teams in that aspect. But again, that might be because they didn't trust Dobbins to do so, or didn't trust their backfield as much as they should. Whereas now they have Harris, and it might swing the other direction. Actually, Harris on the Steelers had almost as many carries and touches inside the 5 and 10 as the entire Chargers backfield, to give you an idea. So if that carries over, I mean, Harris might be in conversation of RB1 just because of volume alone, and that's why I would take him. But I think Warren is still in that same tier for me.
I tweaked my ranking of Warren right before the show, and now I've got him directly behind Najee.
Okay.
But I think both of those guys' rankings are going to be very draft sensitive, and I would expect to change one or both depending on what does or doesn't happen with running backs on the Chargers and Steelers.
Speaking of the draft, you can watch the first round of the NFL draft live with our experts breaking down every pick. Get instant fantasy reactions and team fits from Joey P, Pat Fitzmaurice, Derek Brown, and others as the draft unfolds. Coverage starts on Thursday, April 24th at 7:30 p.m. Eastern on the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel at youtube.com/fantasypros. That's night 1. We will also be live on night 2 as well, so be sure to check out our coverage of the 2025 NFL Draft. All right, Fitz, we're into your top 4 here, breakout candidates for 2025. Who's number 4?
Cartavius, Tank, Bigsby. Let's start with the obvious caveat that Tank is not much of a pass catcher, so his path to stardom is a little more narrow than it is for some of the more versatile running backs. But Tank Bigsby showed last year that he is a very good runner. I think he can be the engine of the Jacksonville running game this year, and he will be playing in an offense that could be much improved this season with Liam Cohen running the offense and Trevor Lawrence healthy again. Travis Etienne is going into the final year of his contract, so there is some incentive for the Jaguars to shift more of the workload over to Bigsby. But the bigger incentive to do that is the fact that Bigsby was the far more effective runner last year. He averaged 4.6 yards per carry. Etienne was at 3.7 yards per carry. Bigsby averaged 3.74 yards after contact per carry. Etienne just 2.48 yards. after contact per carry. Bigsby forced 46 missed tackles, ETN just 17. Bigsby averaged 0.74 rushing yards over expected per carry, which was the 9th best mark in the league. ETN averaged minus 0.28 rushing yards over expected per carry. He was underwater in that category. So Bigsby was a highly effective runner last year. He could have an expanded role, and the Jags offense could take a step forward overall, which would give Bigsby some additional TD upside. He had 7 last year. Not hard to imagine Tank Bigsby having a 10 touchdown season in 2025.
I think, Jake, that we have talked about the Jacksonville backfield on a previous episode. I'm struggling to remember kind of what your approach to both of these two guys were, but specifically Bigsby in this case, since he's the one who's on Fitz's list. But I think we have had this conversation before.
Yeah, it goes all the way back to, like, my opinion of ETN coming out of college was kind of like a Tevin Coleman situation, and that kind of player has some limitations in the NFL, and I think what we're seeing here is that, to go back to the Warren, this is actually the flip, where Bigsby more of that better running back, carry running back, versus the better player being like the elusive space of ETN, more kind of like a cut and go, like the Tevin Coleman. Like, if you told me ETN was on the Shanahan system, thumbs up. And I like, that's actually kind of why I'm with him. Fitz, like, a breakout here is because I could think that I could see Bigsby taking a bigger share of the workload. I am glad he actually beat me to the punch. He threw in the caveat that I think J.K. Dobbins' season last year might be the peak of Bigsby, and the fact that how little he's used in the passing game. And so that's the only concern, is we're probably talking best case RB 15, 16, and assuming he gets a lot of the goal line work. Worst case is he's kind of that frustrating fringe RB2 where you like him every single week, but there's going to be some quiet games where maybe they get behind and all of a sudden he only has 10 touches that game. So I'm with him, and I will have Bigsby on my list, assuming they don't do anything, because Cohen is going into this team and he has no allegiance to either one of them, and maybe they draft somebody. But as of today, I could see Bigsby being a top 2022 running back next season.
Let's get into our top 3. There are 2 receivers and a quarterback on the list for Fitz. Fitz, let's go to your number 3.
Yeah, I love Jake's Tevin Coleman reference. There's a name I've not heard in a long time. Number 3 is Ricky Pearsall. So Pearsall was a late first-round draft pick last year. The start of his season was delayed when he was shot in a robbery attempt. Fortunately, he wasn't seriously hurt. So Pearsall only played 11 games as a rookie, and he really took off in the last 2 of those games. 8 catches, 141 yards, and a touchdown versus the Lions. 6 catches, 69 yards, and a touchdown against the Cardinals. Pearsall is 6'1" with 4.4 speed, and now he's poised for a full-time role in the 49ers offense. Deebo Samuel's gone. Brandon Ayuk is coming off a torn ACL. I think Pearsall's going to be better than Juwan Jennings. Still a lot of target competition for Pearsall in San Francisco with Kittle, Ayuk, Jennings, McCaffrey, but I think we'll see some sporadic outbursts from Pearsall early on, and if an injury or two gives Pearsall a steadier diet of targets, he could really pop.
I think Pearsall, Jake, is somebody that a lot of people are going to be excited about and will have on these types of breakout lists as we get closer to fantasy draft season. Are you in agreement with Fitz on it?
I am, and I like Pearsall, and this is going to sound like a knock, but let me get through it for everybody listening, is that I compared him to Darius Slayton, but put Darius Slayton on the 49ers, and you'd be a lot more excited than Darius Slayton on the Giants, who, by the way, led the Giants in receiving, 4 out of 5 or 5 out of 6 years or something like that, because it's the Giants. Darius Slayton is not super excitable to hear about, like, oh, love some Darius Slayton. But again, you put him on the 49ers as potentially their number 2, and you'd be a hell of a lot more excited. The reason I bring that is because I'm just worried about Pearsall in the short to intermediate game, but I say that, and I saw a little bit better than my initial thought of coming out of college and Florida and everything, is that I thought he did better as a rookie, even the limited time that we saw him, where maybe he's added, or maybe he always had it, I just didn't always see it, but like added that dimension to his game instead of just being a 15-plus yard dominant option. Because let's be clear, going downfield and stacking the corners and getting behind him and everything, like, he is great at that. Like, that's the end of his career. That's all he can do. Nate Washington on the 49ers, cool. But I actually think there's more to it. And I actually think there's a chance where Jennings and Pearsall are both valuable, depending on what happens with Brandon Ayuk. We might be sitting here going, and I'm not saying Fitz was doing this, but like, is it Pearsall, is it Jennings? And the answer might just be both. So I'm investing at their cost, both of them right now, and I love Pearsall's talent. And I think we would have saw a little bit more of that excitement last year, if not, like you said, not for the starting the season with the gunshot wound.
Fitz, what would you say, like, absolutely best case scenario, everything that could go right goes right for Pearsall? Where does he finish this season ranked amongst wide receivers?
Oh, man. I hate to do this because everything going right would probably mean injuries to some of his teammates. But like if he winds up as a top 2 target earner in that offense, I think he could have 1,000-yard season for sure and threaten 10 touchdowns. But yeah, it would probably take an injury. But I think on the merits, if everyone stays healthy, I still think he could be an 800-yard guy.
Okay.
I think with the injuries, he could have Mike Evans' season. 70, 80, 1,100 yards, 7, 8 touchdowns, 9 touchdowns. I think that's in play.
Yeah. I'm really excited to watch Pearsall this year. I'm very intrigued to see how his season plays out. Let's get to that quarterback, Fitz. I mentioned him earlier, Drake Maye. I will just tell you right now, I will be drafting an unhealthy amount of Drake Maye this season. I am like totally in on him as a breakout, especially where he's been ranked and going early on. That could change. If that rises, maybe I'll feel differently. But as of right now, he is like one of my favorite quarterback targets to get this year. I will be dangerous and irresponsible in drafting him in 2025 drafts. Tell me why I am right in that approach.
Because his ECR is QB 16 and I have him at QB 7 and I actually had it higher, but then I didn't want to be totally irrational and move Patrick Mahomes back ahead of him, even though Mahomes hasn't really been anything more than a low-end QB1 for the past 2 years. So yeah, absolutely. Drake Maye's a draft target for me too, Worm, and I certainly won't need to actually draft him as the QB6 or QB7. That's the nice thing about it. Maye is just an aggressive runner who has some serious rushing upside for fantasy. He can be a Konami code guy, hat tip or a tree bar. Maye had 421 rushing yards in 13 games last year. I think he can get to 700 rushing yards this year. And Maye was surprisingly good as a passer in 2024, considering how completely awful his supporting cast was. He was operating behind a bad offensive line and throwing to one of the worst groups of wide receivers in the league. Now he gets to throw to Stephon Diggs, and maybe it's not vintage Stephon Diggs, but, it helps to have a guy who can actually run routes, and the guy who sort of helped Josh Allen turn the corner in his career. Plus the Patriots are probably going to draft at least one more wide receiver. They're also going to draft some offensive linemen, and they added Morgan Moses and Garrett Bradbury in the offseason. So from week 6 of last year, when Maye made his first start, through week 17, he averaged 16.8 fantasy points per game and scored at least 17.7 fantasy points in 7 of those 11 games. And again, that was with an abysmal supporting cast. Drake Maye is going to be a star. It's going to happen quickly, and he's going to be a terrific value in 2025 fantasy drafts.
If we say, Fitz, that let's just establish Drake Maye finishes as like a top 6 or top 8 quarterback. He's in that high-end range. In the pie chart of areas of improvement, what percentage of that has to be the surrounding talent actually being improved compared to last year when it was so terrible versus him taking certain steps forward? Because he's not flawless as a quarterback, even though I'm obviously totally bought in on him as a fantasy quarterback here. What percentage of that needs to be an improvement from him versus from the environment and the people around him?
I think more the environment, 60%.
Okay.
Because, obviously Maye has to get some of the bugs out of his game, and that's going to happen over the next 2 to 3 years, and probably not just all in one fell swoop in 2025. But, I mean, that supporting cast last year, I mean, come on, when Pop Douglas is your go-to receiver, a 5'8" slot guy who at most should be like your 4th receiver, like they've got to upgrade that. So, I'm confident it's going to be a little better. Baby steps with the improved supporting cast and with improvements from Maye himself this year. But still, even with the baby steps, mid-range QB1 upside, no question about it. Maybe even like top 5 if he outkicks rushing expectations.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I like am in total agreement here, and of course, Jake, I want to hear what you have to say. I just feel like if you guarantee health on Drake Maye, I don't think there's any world where he's not a top 12 quarterback this year, and that's like bare minimum. That's without taking a step forward. I just think the rushing that he's going to contribute is so. It's going to be super helpful, obviously. So that's not really going out on a limb, I guess, from that angle to it. But Jake, what do you think about Drake Maye this year?
Yeah, there's a lot of aspects in there that I want to kind of touch on because there's a lot of good ones and I think added context here. So first is if we're talking top 5, I know that's not his draft capital, but even 6 or 7, I'm going to have a 0 Drake Maye. I'm just not going to be that aggressive. That being said, I'm actually surprised at Fitz's answer when you said how much of the pie needs to be whatever. I was like 10%. And here's why. Because what I'm about to say is going to sound like I'm coming for Fitz, but I'm not. If you really think he's going to run for 5, 6, even 700 yards. Let's say 6 to play the middle game there. Then you don't need his cast to improve because I compared him to better Sam Howell, college player that he just replaced before that, but better Sam Howell. Sam Howell in a miserable season without that rushing was top 15 quarterback. You give him 600 yards. Sam Howell with 21 touchdowns and 21 interceptions, not throwing for 4,000 yards. You give him 600 rushing yards and 5 rushing touchdowns. Guess where Sam Howell would have finished that year? QB 9. So I'm actually kind of with Fitz, but differently. Like, I don't think his cast needs to improve. Do I want it to? Absolutely. It's a miserable cast. And I even include that at Diggs because I don't think Diggs is who he was. I think Diggs needs to be a 2 at this point, maybe even a 3, but hopefully just a 2. Hopefully there's enough left for that. But I don't think he has to do that much better. They add one piece in the draft, even if it's round 2 or 3. And I do think QB1 is within play. That being said, like even that one piece is not going to get him quite to QB5 for me, even though like I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, Fitz, I do think you said his ceiling could be top 5. Like if everything went right. I don't think that's this year. I think just because of their weapons, there's just not enough left to improve his weapons that much, even if they draft a wide receiver. Even if it's Tet McMillan, I still think he'll need one more year to hit that top 5. But QB1 is within play, even if they don't draft a wide receiver till day 3. And I'm going to say that as somebody who's not the biggest Drake Maye fan.
Wow.
In thinking about high-end ceiling Fitz, I want to kind of put a bow in the conversation with this. If you look at the guys who in ECR are not ranked as top 12 quarterbacks right now, some of the names, Jordan Love, Caleb Williams, Drake Maye, CJ Stroud, Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence, amongst those types of names, would it if I told you one of those names was going to be a surprise finisher as a top 3 fantasy quarterback this season, how high on that list of guys outside the top 12 would Drake rank for you?
Wait, say that question
of the
again.
names.
Sorry,
I know that was confusing. That's my fault. Of the names who are not in the top 12 quarterbacks right now, some of those names include Jordan Love, Caleb Williams, Drake Maye, Fields, Trevor Lawrence, CJ Stroud. Of those types of names who are not currently top 12 quarterbacks, if I told you one of them had a surprise finish, they were top 3 this year, how high on the list would Drake Maye rank for you of those guys that you think could finish that high in terms of just pure ceiling?
Yeah, I mean, like I really only think the best bet probably to finish like ahead of Drake Maye there is Caleb, because he also returns rushing value, and because I expect that offense to take a big step forward with Ben Johnson. Like I don't think it's Love because the Packers were the 3rd run heaviest team in the league last year, and that was with a not great defense, average at best. Like I don't see them suddenly becoming pass happy, especially with their depleted wide receiver core. Who else? There were some other
Fields.
Non-runners
I
on that
thought you
list.
would say Fields at like 900 rushing yards and the biggest question, Fields play a full season. But I mean,
Right.
if he does 8, 9, he could even push for 1,000. I mean, we're talking about top 7. I think he was in points per game in a miserable season because of the rushing. That's why I put 2. I said that I thought you were going to go Fields then Maye.
Fields, Jake. I that was what my expectation was. Fitz was going to say too.
Yeah, it was hard to process that question. I was still trying to digest Jake's better Sam Howell, which is basically like a pulse and 4 functioning limbs.
No, not turnover Sam Howell, which that's what you like. Better passing smarter Sam Howell. Like there's a lot of similarities between the two. It's just Drake Maye's better as a quarterback than Sam Howell. So that's what that was.
Yeah, that was a bad job by me phrasing the question, but I think we got there in the end. All right, number
Sam
1.
Howell plus.
Yeah. Number 1 breakout star for 2025. Fitz is?
Yeah, this was quite a build-up to get to number one, and this is probably the most boring selection of all because I think he's going to be a chalky breakout pick. It's Rome Odunze. And I do think everyone's going to have Odunze as a guy they're expecting to improve this year in terms of fantasy value. He was the 9th overall pick in last year's NFL draft, so he obviously has immense talent. And his rookie year wasn't even that awful by any means. 54 catches, 734 yards, especially, back in 15, 20 years ago, that would be considered a fine rookie year. And it's really not bad when you consider that he was sharing targets with DJ Moore and Keenan Allen. And when you consider that rookie quarterback Caleb Williams was not exactly setting the world on fire. So now Keenan Allen's out of the picture. Caleb has a year of experience under his belt. The Bears aggressively upgraded their O-line in free agency, which should really help Caleb. And the Chicago offense is now going to be choreographed by Ben Johnson, widely regarded as one of the better play callers in the league. So I think we can expect a big step forward from Rome Odunze in year 2. It's wheels up for Rome.
I not that I want to go really quickly on the number one guy because this should be the most exciting one, like you said, the build up to it. But I think we all are definitely going to be in agreement on here. Jake, I know that you also are excited about Odunze this year.
Yeah, you talked about we always keep doing shows together. If you remember a few weeks ago, I'm going to put you on the spot. You won't probably remember, but I remember what I compared him to, and I just said he's bigger Garrett Wilson, which if you told me the bigger Garrett Wilson, we're all going to go, sign me up. And especially on Ben Johnson's offense with Caleb Williams, just sign me up again. Like Rome Odunze coming out, and I think there's a non-zero chance he has the better season than DJ Moore. I wouldn't put money on it, but there's a non-zero chance. But I want to caution with one thing, because you just said something more, which I want to put for everybody out there. It's April. This is assuming that the Bears don't shock us with a move over the next month or two. Rome Odunze is going to get a lot of helium from now until August. My cautionary tale would be don't go spending top 20, top 15 wide receiver because everybody loves him. I have to go get Odunze. And then you're buying him at what his peak output probably is. And you still have to account for, hey, what if Caleb Williams doesn't improve? What if Ben Johnson's system doesn't translate 100% year one? What if it takes a year? And I just want to throw that out there is we all love Odunze, but remember some of these players where the entire industry loves is sometimes created the worst draft cost return on value that you could potentially get.
Fitz, what do you think about that? Because I think Jake is definitely spot on. I mean, there are usually those players every year that you feel like you're going to have FOMO if you don't get them, and then you start to reach for them to make sure that you get them, or you overpay in a salary cap draft. And then you're basically eliminating the possibility of getting real value on that pick. Do you think Odunze falls under that umbrella for you?
I think Jake did a pretty good job of forecasting the draft landscape 4 months from now, when Rome Odunze is everyone's favorite pick to rise up, and suddenly he's being drafted as a high-end wide receiver 3, something like wide receiver 26, and there's just you're kind of wringing the value out of him at that point. You need a lot of improvements in his numbers for him to return profit on that kind of cost. So, yeah, I mean, that's the worry here, that he does get too much helium, and that sort of bakes out the fantasy value.
Jake, before we get out of here, I just wanted to ask kind of a macro level view of this list. Obviously, there's no rookies on here. 5 of the 10 names, so half of the list, are second-year guys. Does that feel like the right percentage to you if you were putting together a breakout players list?
Yeah, I think that's kind of the world we're in, especially with wide receivers now, is a lot of times we're seeing them drafted to Jackson Smith and Jigba, Rome Odunze now this year. We're seeing them fall into situations where it's hey, it's not the perfect spot year one. Some of the players that ended up on teams where it's a new system, takes a year usually for the quarterback to develop as well. So year 2 seems to be more the breakout than year 3 like it used to be. Year 3 still, we talked about when we talked about the tight end situation, is more than anything. But year 2 is similarly, these players are coming out of college producing a lot quicker and given the opportunity, which is the big thing, to produce a lot quicker. A lot of we used to have that old regime of head coaches you have to prove yourself in the NFL before I give you opportunities. And we're kind of seeing that they're getting the opportunities now. So all that being said, there was a piece, and now the name just escaped me. Of course I was about to say it, that I just saw on Twitter where he's I used to Ryan Heath. That actually wrote an article about year 2 wide receiver breakouts and how that used to be a gold mine, but we might be swinging too far. So just to be cautionary again, but yeah, year 2, I would say 50% hit rate of calling for breakouts, so probably similar once I start writing all my articles as well.
Fitz, any final thoughts wrapping up, putting together this
No,
list?
that's it. I mean, year 2 is a golden spot for breakouts, but who knows? You can always get them a little later. I mean, we got a year 7 breakout from Jonnu Smith last year. Sometimes it just takes a while.
All it takes is 3 teams and injuries. You can get there.
Our next episode will be our Jonnu Smith All-Star team, so we'll see what list Fitz puts together for that. No, I'm just kidding. All right, thanks everybody for tuning in. Thank you to Jake and Fitz for joining as always. We appreciate everybody. We'll see you again next time. For Jake and Fitz, I'm Ryan. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you.